Good evening, everybody. We're going to call the March Planning and Zoning Commission Board meeting to order. If everybody would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, how about roll call, Andy, please?
All right, Chair Costello.
Here.
Commissioner Tantillo, absent. Commissioner Holm. Here. Commissioner Bruno.
Here.
Commissioner Svestka.
Here.
Commissioner Barnes.
Here.
Commissioner Skovich, absent. All right, we have a quorum. Also, note really quick, we turned the volume of the microphones up a little bit. There had been some concern that you couldn't hear, so you can speak normal volume, don't yell. So.
Okay. First item, we'd like to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes and have a chance to review?
And I'll mention really quick with the minutes, there are a few typos that I need to fix, and then also Brookside Plaza on item 2 should be IHP Plaza. Special use number 8, special use hearing for 6506 Howard should be for 6500 Howard. And then number 10 should just say 6527 Laurel special use hearing instead of just special use hearing. Those are the modifications that I recommend. I know last meeting was a long meeting, so I might have missed something, so let me know if we should add anything else.
I noticed that let's see, on the first page, it discusses misspelled. Anybody else find anything?
Meeting is misspelled as well.
Oh, where?
Next to discussed.
Oh, yeah.
Spell check was off. Under item number 10, the special use hearing, the last case that we heard, the special use permit request for a new shed and a new fence, I think that needs to be corrected under the vote for the shed. If I recall correctly, I voted no on that one as well.
Okay, that was you. Yeah, it's hard, it's hard to tell because I'm just looking at the Zoom recording and I'm like, who's that? Who's that? So, okay, I will add you as well.
Okay. Any other corrections, comments?
The only other thing I noticed is on occasion, Chair Costello, instead of having 2 L's, has the number 1 and 1. So that's that might be something, again, I feel like we're back in English class here. I don't want to belabor the point, but since somebody brought it up.
Yeah, our software that we use, sometimes when you transition it to Word to Adobe, it does funny things. So yeah, we'll change that.
Okay. Hearing no more corrections, if somebody would like to make a motion to approve the minutes as modified.
I move.
And second?
Second.
Dan and Justin. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to approve the minutes as modified. Okay, what do we got first? Our first hearing is 6500 Howard.
And really quickly, the homeowners for 6500 Howard and 6506, that is another type. It shouldn't be 5605. It should be 6506. They asked to switch their order around.
Okay.
No problem with it. We just need, for the record, a motion to adjust the agenda.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to adjust the agenda to switch A and B under old business? Switch the
I will make that
order?
motion.
Diane, any second? Dan seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. So we will now hear the petition for 6506 Howard Avenue. Is a petitioner here? Good evening. And your name?
My name is Kat Lotke. It is louder.
It's loud.
Okay. And you'd like to say a few words first?
I do. I have a presentation tonight. Just to review, we're obviously submitting an application for a shed. At the last meeting, it was noted that our shed application is within scope for approval, but only if we agree to place it within the remaining buildable area. Over the past several weeks, I've reviewed our situation and conducted some additional research to see the effect that this would have. And with that research, I continue to support the determination that it does not make sense to build within this designated area. My first point is that the spirit of the special use was to allow residents the ability to have the benefits of outdoor storage while still maintaining that park-like atmosphere. Building our shed within the remaining buildable area is in direct conflict with this. So if we can progress to slide 2. So for your consideration, I've taken a photo of the approach leading up to our property. This is directly from 65th Place and Howard Avenue. I've boxed out a rough estimation of where the shed would be placed within that buildable area. It's a rough drawing, but I'm sure it's plain to see that any structure placed in that space is clearly visible at street side. So it's that, obviously, the plain box. No amount of evergreen foliage is going to disguise the shed, and the fact remains that any structure placed there is going to be visible and break up that open feeling. Now, outside of the buildable area, on our nearly half-acre lot, there are several options for placement that are not visible or disruptive to any open aesthetic. And I've noted what we feel the best placement would be on our plat of survey. So that's the next slide. So the yellow area is the remaining buildable area. There's a small box, a 10 and a 12 placement for where that shed would be located. And then to the northwest of the lot, I've proposed an alternative placement. At this location, the shed is naturally masked by about 10 to 15 feet of existing brush and tree cover at the rear of the lot, and I've indicated roughly by the green area. With respect to the terms of the special use, we would plan to add to that with evergreens behind the shed as well as on 2 additional sides. The next slide. So this is a street side picture facing the proposed placement of where we're looking. At this location, you would not be able to see the shed you would only be able to see it from directly in front of our driveway, and you'd have to look really carefully to see it. It's actually, in this angle, you can't even see it because it's disguised by the existing foliage. From the public perspective, I feel that this would be a much more appealing placement. And from the homeowner's view, it's a much more appealing placement as well, as illustrated by my next pictures. So in this image, I've sketched out roughly where the shed would be visible from the interior of our house. This position poses a severe disruption of light and visibility to 3 major windows in our house. The windows most impacted are in our great room and in our master bathroom. Not only does this block airflow and light, it also would pose a negative impact on the aesthetic of the house. Who wants to see a shed that up close and personal? And not only would this negatively impact my own family, but should we choose to sell our house in the future, I can definitely envision this having a negative impact on the value of the property. So at the last meeting, we can take a look at some of the other windows. So this is it's a little hard taking a picture from inside to out, but roughly this, if you can see, my husband did some very technical stomping out in the snow. So you can see the two lines for where that shed would be placed. And this is the view from my couch. So it would be directly blocking that entire window. So at the last meeting, it was suggested that we consider a smaller or different format shed, such as a lean-to or possibly something like that to limit how it impacts the windows. I did take these suggestions into consideration and conducted some research. A lean-to, first of all, would not work, given the fact that there isn't wall space in that area to accommodate, at least not without blocking the windows even further. We did look at some smaller models, and that's what I've mapped out on the plat. I also looked at several shed calculators online to see what would really make sense for us. Given the size of our property and the house and the size of our family and the amount of outdoor gear that we have to store, every calculator came away with a determination of at least a 12 by 12. In some cases, it was even more. Changing the size of the shed also ignores the fact that street side visibility would still be blocked by a shed of any size placed in that area. My final point, though, is to note that the fact that that approving sheds outside the buildable area is definitely within this council's power. Talking to Andy, there have been 13 special use applications for approval of existing sheds, and of those applications that have been reviewed, 8 have been approved despite the fact that the structures are placed outside the buildable area on the property. When those homeowners determined where their sheds would go, it would appear that those homeowners didn't pay any heed to the buildable area. Instead, they chose the placement based on what made sense for their own property. Placing a shed directly in front of windows to block an otherwise beautiful view does not make sense. And we appreciate all the work that's gone into this initiative, and we respect the efforts to keep the beauty and the spirit of the neighborhood. As new residents, we are doing and will continue to do so everything that we can to support that initiative. But strictly adhering to the buildable area requirement does not make sense. Maintaining that requirement means that sheds have to be placed in awkward locations that could negatively impact the value of the property and are in direct conflict with the main objective. Approval activity for submitted applications to date has shown that this requirement is more often than not unfeasible. And as such, we respectfully ask that the council consider our application with the same consideration as existing sheds. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you for your time. So just some of the facts. The Lotke's have gathered the signatures of their neighbors. They don't object. They have provided the plat of survey. And now, because this is a special use application, now we need a variance application, do we not, Andy?
So, yeah, my thinking is this. I don't think she meets the requirements for a variance, but the commission essentially has two options. You can, if you agree with the current shed ordinance and the restrictions that it has, that sheds have to be placed in the buildable area, then if you agree with that, you have to stick with it. If you think that it makes more sense to allow homeowners to place sheds outside of the buildable area, and of course meeting all the other criteria, and we could even add more criteria, like it has to be within 5 or 10 feet of a property line. It can't block a drainage path, something like that. But if you believe that residents should be able to place a shed outside of the buildable area, you can make that recommendation to the Board of Trustees as well. It's really a policy decision that the board will ultimately make based on the policy recommendation of the commission. I'll say, as far as village staff is concerned, we're not concerned really with the idea of sheds being outside the buildable area, as you know, they would still be subject to inspections for screening. The other concern is possible stormwater drainage issues, but that would be inspected as well. You know, and from my personal point of view, I think that a shed with screening next to it, plants or arborvitaes or whatever you want to plant to screen it, I think that's it's going to look more natural to the park-like atmosphere than playhouses or trampolines that can go anywhere as they are right now. So from staff's point of view, we don't have a problem with it. It's really a policy decision for the board based on the policy recommendations of the
And
commission.
Can I clarify something? I believe that the only sheds so far that have been approved outside buildable were existing sheds.
They were. And,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
and the idea was to give them more leeway because they were existing sheds. But if the commission feels that new sheds should be able to be placed outside, they can make that recommendation as well.
So Andy, I'm a little confused on the second part of what you said about perhaps deviating from the existing parameters of the regulation. Because, we went through a big exercise, if not last year, the year before, on kind of solidifying those requirements that, after much back and forth with the committee and back to the board, that we finally kind of decided these were parameters for allowing sheds, which was different from the previous regulation, which said no sheds. So are you saying that you feel like the board would like us to maybe revisit that again? I'm thinking of all the work we put into it, and that just seems like
I know.
backpedaling on that. I'm confused.
Oh, I know. What I'm saying is that, well, I'll say from my point of view, from staff's point of view, we don't have a problem with sheds outside the buildable area. That was included in the ordinance, I think, out of the idea that, to protect the park-like atmosphere. Personally, I think that you can do that through screening and inspections, but everybody has a different opinion, and ultimately, it is the policy decision of the elected representatives and the appointed commissioners to
Well,
decide.
also, and this makes it no different than somebody wants to build a deck, and we say, yeah, you can, but it's no feasible way to put it in the buildable area. We have the authority to say, okay,
Yeah,
we
so-
can, with all the facts considered.
So really, I think if you think that sheds should be able to be placed outside the buildable area, you would be recommending to the board to modify the ordinance, to modify the shed ordinance.
And they can do that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, do they have to change the ordinance at that time?
Yeah, but it's
Not a big
not a.
Like overall?
Yeah.
Like just change the ordinance for everyone going forward? Or
Yeah.
just on the case-by-case basis?
Well, it would change the ordinance for everyone, but ultimately it is going to be case by case because they're going to have to come before the commission.
I just feel
and
like
the
that's in
board.
direct conflict with everything else we've done up to this point.
But it's not. We just approved a shed on that crazy-shaped lot, and that was nowhere near the buildable area because you couldn't
Well,
in that
but
lot.
I think the important part of that is what the ordinance kind of leaned to, that we wanted to address every case individually.
Exactly, and we're still going to address every case individually.
I just don't
every
think
case
going back and recommending a change to the ordinance overall is necessarily going to solve the issue of still needing to determine what each
Yeah, why do
petitioner
we
is
have to change
requesting.
the ordinance? Because we've already approved sheds outside the buildable area.
Well, the reason you need to change the ordinance is because the ordinance is written to allow approval for sheds outside the buildable area if they are existing.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas for new sheds, they have to be in the buildable area. So you would have to change the ordinance to allow new sheds to be placed outside or anywhere.
Yeah. I
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
I don't mean to interrupt, but your recommendations say, as of right now, staff can only recommend approval if it's located in the buildable area. Is that exclusively because it's new, or you just went on kind of we just started talking about evergreens and shading and some of these things where on a staff level, if those things are met, that you're okay with it. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so we can only recommend approval if it meets the criteria of the ordinance, but the commission is able to recommend changing those criteria, changing the ordinance. the recommendation that I gave for staff is based upon the current ordinance. And which is what we have to go off of, because that is the direction of the board right now. But it is if the commission feels differently, the commission is much more knowledgeable of these circumstances than the board, because the board largely goes off of your recommendations. I mean, they review the cases and they look at it too, but you are the ones that really go in depth into it. And so your recommendations carry a lot of weight with them. They don't have to go with your recommendation, but if it is something that the commission feels should be modified, then I would recommending that to the board and letting them, they ultimately will have the final decision.
So, sorry. So in this particular situation, could the board actually come back to us and say, hey, as the board, we would like you to review changing the ordinance? Because that to me would be compelling from the board down. I personally feel like where we are at as the commission, we spent, like I said, an inordinate amount of time determining that the ordinance as it is written is the correct way to present it today.
Yeah.
So,
But why isn't this a variance?
yeah.
So, well, you could make it a variance, but I don't think, from staff's point of view, we could recommend approval, because
It's so far.
having a shed block a window is not a unique enough of a circumstance because to get a variance, you have to show a unique hardship. And while it is I would say it does qualify as a hardship, I don't think it's a unique one. So based off the rules for variances, staff can't recommend a variance. I know it's
And to address like your concern, Danielle, that we spent so much time doing that, and I get it, like we did, and that's what we came up with. But like after something gets put into practice, we kind of we find things that didn't work exactly how it was. So sometimes we need to change our thought process that we previously had when new things happen.
I'm not disagreeing with that. Like I know forward progression of all things is beneficial for everyone. It was very recent, right? And we recently heavily debated this issue as to A, if we would allow sheds, and B, if we did, how we would define the parameters for which they could be applied.
And that was before we had a real live example in front of us, you know.
It was, but I mean, we did have existing examples that we used for reference. So
This is the first one, first time this one came up.
I have a
you know.
question about that too, that, in the 8 of the 9, and I'm sorry, were you
No,
finished?
you're good, yeah.
On the 8 of the 9 existing sheds that were placed outside the buildable area, I mean, was the primary reason to approve those, was it because, like, functionality, was it aesthetics, was it, obstruction, was it some of the reasons that,
I think we were,
I'm sorry, one more time on your name?
Kat,
Kat points out as to why her particular proposed shed won't work in that location and why she wants to go outside the buildable area.
All
Like,
the other ones were existing, and the whole
we were giving-
purpose of that committee was to try to work with all these homeowners that had existing sheds.
and not make them have to take it
They had
out.
purchased homes that had a non-compliant structure on them. They had not placed the shed there themselves.
Yeah.
Right, but if we would have asked them to move it into the buildable area,
Could
because it
have,
was outside
yes.
the buildable area, would we have been creating a hardship? I guess is my question.
That didn't even occur to me, but you.
But
I
if
guess
you
we
say
could've-
we're gonna do this one size fits all thing where, you're outside the buildable area, okay, it's a bummer that you bought a house this way, but now you gotta put it inside the buildable area. Oh, and by the way, we're gonna block your windows, we're gonna block, make the property less appealing. So for the exact reasons why we let them be, is there any reason why we shouldn't consider letting somebody else use their property the way that they may see fit if for some reason aesthetics or obstruction were the primary reason? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I guess I would submit that our group has to consider the aesthetic impact of something, not just for the homeowner on their own property, but the homeowners on either side, the homeowners to the rear, the homeowners to the front. I mean, part of the, I'm thinking back to the discussions we had, part of it was placing it in the buildable area because the likelihood then was that if there was going to be an impact, potentially negative impact of putting that shed on the property, it was going to fall mostly to the homeowner and not to the neighbors and the people, you know, who might later live in the area. That our obligation is to maintain that open feel overall, and that letting somebody routinely put a shed in the back corner of their property does not achieve that over the long run.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying, like, I'm looking at the initial rendering that Kat had put up that shows the shed, like, very visible from the street. And I'm looking at the CAD drawing on the second page, which has it back in an area that seems to be pretty well concealed, and we have this process of making sure the neighbors aren't upset about it. So, again, I don't want to be going down the road of unearthing all the good work the committee's done over the last year and a half, but I also think, to Justin's point, you know, uses of space evolve as people need things, depending on family, depending on what's going on. If we're creating a hardship by forcing somebody to move something back closer to their house and are not allowed to use their space as they see fit, I just have some concerns about that as a policy moving forward, where we're forcing somebody just to put something somewhere because, you know, it's a couple feet outside of maybe where we want it.
I think putting a shed in front of a window is unacceptable. I mean,
I do too.
This is boiling down to shed or no shed. It's not.
Could I just ask a question on the diagram that you provided with the plot of survey where you had the shed
Yep.
sketched into the buildable area?
Yes.
What is the distance between the corner of the shed and that corner portion of your home that I believe has the window on it?
That, I believe it's about 10 feet.
10 feet?
Yeah. It's pretty much 10 or 12 feet from any of those angles besides the furthest one.
Okay. And then in one of the photos that you submitted, I believe it's the view from the major
Yep.
window photo. It looks like there's like a foot traffic path kind of like through the back of your lot, maybe going somewhere else into the village. Are you concerned at all with like security of your shed if there is a lot of foot traffic that goes through there?
Those are actually my mom's footprints.
Oh, okay. Okay. No worries. Thanks.
And also to that point, I'm not concerned about I mean, I would be as concerned about my house as I would about my shed. But it's really, it's not that much of an issue because our lot is, I mean, we don't see a whole lot of traffic through it.
Okay.
So,
Andy, go ahead.
I think we've determined that there's substantial hardship so that we would, under best of circumstances, approve of a shed. Are we all in agreement on that? No.
Well,
Okay.
so I'm kind of struggling with where we are at upholding the regulations as they're written versus, investigating additional options for the homeowner. Because, if it was a black and white issue or said, does this meet the parameters outlined? No, not unless it's in the buildable area. That being said, I see the very well-done presentation that the homeowner has brought in, and I can see where perhaps placing it outside of the window might not be ideal. I mean, 10 feet's, I thought you were going to say like 3 feet, and I was going to be like, well, there's an ingress-egress issue there. 10 feet,
right.
I mean, you do get airflow through 10 feet. You're probably blocking your view. I get that. I just hesitate with approving because as it's written right now, that would potentially open up a bunch of other issues that without changing the regulation, we would need to have this type of discussion about again. So this is kind of one of those things where, I mean, I don't know if we can even ask the board what their thoughts or feelings are on it? Because like I
Well,
said,
they want our thoughts, it's, you know.
Well,
I mean, it's not, we're
no,
not the
I
final
know.
decider, so they really want our thoughts.
I know, but I mean, I feel like we might be a little unsure. I am personally.
Yeah, that's why
A
we're
little
talking.
unsure.
Yeah, let's
So-
see if we can hone in.
Just so I'm clear real fast on the variance process, you say that there needs to be what they call a unique hardship. When we started these conversations earlier in the year about whether or not a owner should be able to have a shed on their property, there was a lot of discussion about garage size, right? In terms of like, your property doesn't allow you to store all the things you need to maintain your yard. And in context of this application, it's a 20-foot by 20-foot dimension, which staff has acknowledged is really difficult to fit everything that you need in there. So I'm trying to understand is that a reason for the variance because that's the hardship, or is the hardship here is the
Special use.
is a variance? Is also the hardship come with where we're forcing to put where we're forcing to put the shed based on the buildable area.
Well, we're, two issues. The small garage is reason to recommend the special use. So we're saying it's okay to have a shed. Second issue, where can you put it?
And then the variance is it's why the staff can't recommend, because we don't see, the staff doesn't see a real hardship to offer that. But could we vote on a special use and a variance at this point and send that to the board without amending any kind of change to the ordinance?
You could. I mean, and so the staff recommendation is we don't think that the hardship is unique enough, but it's not staff's call. If the commission thinks that the hardship is unique enough, you can make that recommendation.
But it is unique. I mean, I wish I had do you have the ordinance in front of you? Because we've often recommended when it's just a hardship that's not unique. In fact, all those Ashbrook decks were not unique hardships, but they were hardships.
I think, though, that it was just the
And
staff.
people,
was the one
that's the
recommending.
thing is, with as all you know, with zoning, it's very gray. It's very open to interpretation. But
I think more importantly is how significant the hardship is. Like, is it a mere inconvenience? In fact, that's the wording. Is it a mere inconvenience or is it a hardship? And putting a shed in front of a window is a hardship.
Sorry,
I
can
would say.
I ask the petitioner a question really quick?
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, going back to your plat right here. So I think there's a fireplace.
Yep.
And you've provided the view out of the window that's in the yellow buildable area. Is there a window on the other side of the fireplace as well? Yeah, sure.
So this is, let's see, okay, so that's a window.
Okay, and that's a window,
And then that,
And this is your fireplace?
that's the fireplace, yep.
Okay. Would there be any less of an impact to the visual pathway if you perhaps moved the shed still in the buildable area, but over so it kind of abuts to your patio area, so it's more behind your fireplace?
There are existing arborvitae right there. So it's not on the plat, but that's probably about 3 feet of space there. So this is much smaller. So the arborvitae,
Here.
yeah, there's arborvitae on 3 sides of our patio.
Oh, I think I see the ones over here. Okay.
So
Okay.
moving it closer that would be worse. It would completely obstruct that window.
Sorry, one more time. Is there a window
Okay.
right here?
So it's actually,
Can-
let's see.
Can
Yeah,
we pull it
yeah,
up on the,
that's about- yeah,
can we
yeah.
pull it up on the screen so everybody else can see it? I just think, I don't want to seem like we're having a localized conversation over here.
Do we,
Or a variance and special use, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, he'll pull it up in a second.
That's for sure. It's all- I would go to- I see those conditions. I think this fits. Do you know, Citros, that big cabana? That's not inconvenient, that's not hard, you know? It's, as long as it's in, yeah.
Sorry not to interrupt, but should we be hearing this? I
Lou, do you want to make that comment? Just let everyone.
In the super loud microphone. No, go ahead. No, I want to hear it now. I want to hear it.
Sorry, I was just talking to Andy. We were talking about
meeting.
drinking later. No, really,
Starting a public hearing, right?
you guys, sorry, you guys talked about the last meeting, you brought up about that woman with the goofy size lot.
Yeah.
You moved hers, and the one before her is 6537. That was Ryan, who came in crutches, and you guys moved his. All right? And that's just, I
From
know
buildable
they're-
to non-buildable?
So with Ryan's house, he volunteered to move it, and then the home.
That was only a couple of feet is what he moved.
Yeah, it was easier for him than
Yeah.
it is for Cat, because his where he wanted it was just a little bit off of the buildable area, so he volunteered to move it. The one with the odd-shaped lot, that one was granted a variance because the buildable area was
Like 1 foot.
like very small because it was built prior to annexation. So that one was a unique circumstance, it merited a variance, and that's why it was able to be moved. It's the situation of Cat is, I think, more similar to Ryan. Just Ryan had a little bit easier. He could just move it a couple feet because he only wanted it a couple
But
feet
you are
away.
going to be coming up with
Yeah.
all these people that don't have sheds now, too. You know what I mean? There is
Oh,
a
yeah.
few
No,
people
I-
in there, and that's
that's a
going to
valid
be the
point.
issue, is where they're going to be able to put it.
But can you refresh my memory on Ryan's? Was it an existing one, or was
No.
it one that he had
It,
put
it
in
was
himself?
it was the first new shed we
Yeah,
looked at.
right. Okay.
He wanted to place it somewhere, let's just say
Yeah.
5-10 feet outside the buildable area.
Right.
On the property.
I spoke to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I got no problem moving it to the buildable area." So
That's fine. I just wanted to.
With the weird buildable area right next door to it.
Yeah, I got it. Just wanted to remember what it was. That's all.
But if I may just say one thing about Ryan, too. In the beginning, when he was standing here, and everybody was trying to get him to move, there was a man sitting over there, the gentleman, who actually said, "Hey, you just move it this much. You've got a half-acre lot. Just saying, you can move it." And you guys would have went along that day. If he would have said, "Well, okay, I'll put it in the back, or I'll put it over here." I just think that because he was this close, the man sitting there, I don't know him by name, black hair or
Right,
whatever.
or Greg.
Okay, but Greg was here that night and they ended up sending him back because we had to think about it. But I'm just saying, things are changing a little bit as you go, but he was a new one too.
Yeah, and
And
we did
Cat's
find
a
a
new
good
one.
resolution for him, which
Right.
everybody was satisfied with, so.
But
yeah.
if he would have said, "Gee, okay, I'll put it back in my lot," you probably would have approved it that night, is all I'm saying.
We were
I
kind of,
think so.
I don't know,
Well,
because it was feasible to do it in the buildable area.
Well, so I'm trying to see if there's any other way that we could use your buildable area to maybe place the structure somewhere where we don't have to to continue on this other, somewhere that would be an easy approval, right? Because,
Right. I
And-
mean,
and-
I've examined it. I mean, knowing the property, there's really any place that you go further towards the patio is going to block the window even more. And any further in towards the house, I mean, those are the only directions you can go. You can go north or you can go east, and either way, you're just getting closer to windows. And I mean, ideally, that it's not feasible. I think I've already made that point. I mean,
And you
it's-
made a good case that it's even better for neighbors and public.
right.
Made a
That,
reason.
the case that what's better for the neighbors?
That
and
the
public?
placement outside the buildable area, with screening, is probably less obstructive to everybody else's view.
Right. It goes back to the first slide. The approach from Howard Avenue and 65th Place, you can see it visibly. Anyone coming down the street would be able to see that, and that open lot is just broken up. So
Well, it would be shielded with landscaping.
But it would
which
still
be required.
But it would still look like a structure. As much as many arborvitae that you would put there, it would still be a break in that space. Right now, it's very open. You can see the all the trees in the back. You can see it looks like an open park, but actually, I probably should have put that picture up. I should have provided a picture of the lot without that shed there. But I mean, that entire approach, you would just see it.
So just to
Well,
confirm,
go ahead, finish.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm holding this up, but your
Yep.
approach photo kind of shows it juxtaposed off the side of your home.
Yeah.
Whereas the plot kind of shows it in line with the side of your home. So would it actually really stand out that much? Or would it be more in line like an actual structure of your home?
You can see that, no, you can see it from all different angles. So, I mean, it's a rough estimation, but it's still roughly within that area. That big open space is going to be obstructed.
I'll say I was actually out in the neighborhood today looking at some stormwater drainage issues, and we did take a little look, and it is visible that where it would go. It is.
Well, I think this goes back to my original point that what we're doing by thinking more about this view is saying that the important view is the view from the street in front of the house and how visible it is there. We're not considering the fact that if it was put outside the buildable area towards the back of the lot, it's then much more visible for people who are in the park to the north. It's much more visible for the people who live in the condos behind. I mean, it's
But wouldn't
which
they
vantage
have,
point is considered to be the important
Most well
vantage point
deserving
for-
of preservation.
Right. I mean, that's
to the
kind
north
of
of
why
it,
we
though,
went
there'd be
back to
bushes,
the
right?
idea of it
Or
being
the,
Right.
close to the primary structure.
So there's, like I said, there's about 10 to 15 feet of existing brush right now. So that view is already obstructed.
Excuse me really quick. David, can you put the zoom on? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me bring this up. A little aerial.
Can you make it bigger? Okay, thanks.
So her buildable area is, what she's got left is right here, near those windows. She wants to put it somewhere back here. And I think this is a case where putting it farther back would probably screen it more, because you have these bushes and the neighbor's trees. But, it's not every case, but
and there were just
Tennis courts
trees.
right there?
yeah, from Wilshire's tennis courts.
And both neighbors are okay with it. And then if we had coverage on at least maybe even 3 sides instead of 2
Right.
along
Yeah.
the tennis court.
In all these circumstances, the neighbor signed off based on the proposed placement of the homeowners. So in the case of Kat, this neighbor signed off on it being placed around here. Same thing with Mr. Swiderski, her neighbor that we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, the neighbors have signed off on it being here.
So we could make a vote tonight for a special use and variance approval?
You could, yes. I can't recommend the variance.
Right.
My recommendation would be, if you think it should be placed outside the buildable area, or if you think it should be able to, then recommend modification to the code. If that's what you want to do, that's what I would recommend. But you can recommend a variance, you can recommend modification, you can recommend
Because a variance
status
would
quo.
be, we
It's
wouldn't change
entirely
any
up to you.
existing code, and then we would still, each person who came in, petitioner, would still have to show a reason for a variance and a special use, so we would preserve that, the time we spent and the ordinance that we've written.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't think I recommend that route, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
If we make a recommendation for a modification, now we need a big discussion on exactly what the modification we're recommending
Yeah.
is.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you can make a recommendation as vague as, we recommend that the village board consider modification to the code to allow sheds to be placed outside the buildable area, and then the board
Maybe when
And
it's
we're-
not feasible to have it in the buildable area.
Yeah. Or, if they have to meet a couple more requirements, it's something that would have to get worked out, but it's really up to the commission what you want to recommend. What do you think is best?
Yeah.
The best policy.
Can I take ask, how do we all feel about, is it important for a family today to be able to have additional storage if there's not sufficient storage in their garage area for everything we discussed? I mean, I don't think we're all on the same page as far as that.
I think that we've all come to the conclusion that some of the existing houses are just that. They're built a certain way that don't allow people to have the equipment they need to maintain their property in their yard. And, I think we all agree that that's an important part of being a homeowner too, is making sure that you have everything you need to keep your property looking nice, just from like a neighborhood aesthetic standpoint. I think that the main thing here is, when I hear the word variance, I hear the word variability, that there's like a lot of variables involved with different people's properties, and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And I think if we've got a process outlined where we ask people to check with their neighbors and they're being good neighbors by doing that and their neighbors approve, then you've got a lot of factors in favor of allowing that homeowner to try to use the property as they see fit within some guidelines on aesthetics. And I just think in this situation, I don't think we're disrupting the apple cart that much.
Anybody else want to jump in? Do you not think so, Diane? That a homeowner should be entitled?
Not necessarily, no. I think that sheds should be approved under very limited circumstances if the intention of this commission is to help maintain the open and unique character of the village.
Okay.
I think there has to be a pretty high bar to get over
Okay.
to make the case that it's absolutely necessary. I think my definition of what is a hardship is a little higher.
I think this is the crux of some of our differences, but
I agree.
does everybody want to state their opinion on it? So we kind of,
Sorry, state my opinion specifically on which
the
aspect.
question is, do we feel that a homeowner is entitled to a shed if they can reasonably show that they need the storage space? Is that fair?
I think the word entitled is a little strong. I think they absolutely have the right to ask for one and present the case.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I just say that you also have to take into account the safety factor. I mean, it's not necessarily an entitlement. It's the fact that I don't feel that it's safe to have gasoline and oil and all of the lawn chemicals within my garage, which is attached to my house. Around, I don't think that's feasible. I mean, I feel like there's a safety factor there, and it's not necessarily entitlement, but it's the fact that it doesn't make sense to have all that stuff around children and around a family and breathing in the air. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily an entitlement, but it makes sense.
So I don't disagree with you, but then I would say, what do we say to the homeowners that have a 30 by 30 garage that say, hey, I don't want to keep gasoline in here because I want to keep it somewhere else? I mean, I'm not disparaging the fact that safety is an issue, but we just have to be able to apply it fairly to everybody.
Right, but if you have a 30 by 30 garage, you have a little bit more room to store those chemicals in a different way, and maybe have them in a more enclosed container. And I don't have that option, and I can't even open my car doors, let alone store a bunch of chemicals. So.
Just like, if somebody wanted to put a deck on and didn't have room in the buildable area, we have in the past said, well, that's something that most modern families like to have a place to entertain outside, and that's reasonable today. The cabana on Pontiac, things change with the times and what's reasonable for today's families.
So, hearing all of this and not necessarily disagreeing with all aspects of it, I think that we should probably then talk about revising the code for sheds, because it seems like the way that it is right now, that we're causing a lot of confusion amongst ourselves and the homeowners.
It's
So-
sausage making, it's just how it goes.
Well, no, but I mean, I really think that we have, parameters in place, and if we now say, hey, now that we've gotten into this process and we've actually had homeowners come to us and petition for new sheds based on whatever, and we're saying, yeah, so when we did this discussion last year, it doesn't really apply to the current state, then I think we owe it to the village and to the residents of the village to go back and say, then I think we need to go back to the drawing board with us. I mean, I just, because I feel like making an exception for one homeowner and then cascading that to other homeowners.
But that's what
is
we
gonna-
do on this commission. We make exceptions every day.
But we also try to keep things within
We keep,
the written
try to be consistent.
yeah, letter of how it's
Which
presented. So
I guess we have a difference of opinion, but
Yeah.
I think we've approved variances like this 1,000 times in the past. But we would call it a variance, and maybe we weren't being as strict to the letter as we've done that, but we certainly analyzed it with the findings of fact.
I mean, to your point, if we go back and revise it and we either would change it or we wouldn't, right? And then we'd be back to the same spot again.
Well, I mean, if we change it to say something along the lines of sheds of a certain size are allowed, and they're allowed anywhere on the homeowner's property if their neighbors all agree, or something to that effect.
Well, we always have the right to look at it and say the best place on this lot where it's going to be the least obstructive is here. We always have that, and that's our job. That's
Sure.
an important part of our job. Yeah.
Sure.
Because I think that it needs to be more than I've asked my neighbors, and they said they didn't mind.
Yeah.
Because, they may mind, and they just don't feel comfortable saying that they mind. I mean, that puts the neighbors in a position that they shouldn't be put in, quite frankly. The commission's job is to apply the ordinance consistently throughout the village.
Yeah. And
But although I appreciate that, and I'm not saying this to sound in any way like, flip, but then why would we even have a signature process? You know what I mean? Like, if we felt like we were putting a neighbor out
because
by.
if somebody's vocal about it,
Right.
doesn't want it,
I'm
that's
saying like
important to know.
we have the process because it's a buy-in, it's an opt-in, it requires the owner to do some diligence and give some thought to what it actually looks like, because it might impact the neighbors. And to your point, if they don't like it, they can say, hey, buzz off, I don't like it. So, I don't know at what point we think that the neighbor's word is, on par with what we have to do here. Sometimes I can't tell, because if we've asked the owner to jump through these hoops to do that, then I think we need to at least assign a little bit of weight and credibility to it, because, we're the ones that made up the rule. So that's all.
I suppose a motion, are we ready to discuss a motion? Or any public comments on this issue? Okay.
Well, I thought the trustees voted on sheds for Indian Head Park and our Bartlett area.
There's a whole lot of conditions.
Well, they never said anything. I guess I'm gonna have to get that list then. But as for our area that we're working on now, everybody in that petition, I think, Dan, you called me or something, or asked a question one time about what I wanted done. What was I doing that for? On the shed issue anyways.
I don't recall calling you, but
Well,
that's. yeah,
something
yeah.
happened. Maybe we just talked, or I heard in a Zoom or something. But that's the way I thought everything was.
What?
That we're all allowed sheds. Of course, we have to get a variance on it. That's all. I didn't know about anything else.
Well, there is an ordinance, so if you want to read the ordinance.
All right, well, that,
Yeah.
and then also,
Because we can't just say, oh, if you're over there, you can have it, the rest of the village, you can't.
well, the
we
whole
were trying
village
to
was
make
supposedly allowed to, is what I understood.
The ordinance applies to the whole village. Basically the ordinance had it changed the criteria to get a special use. Where it did a few, and it has two separate sets of criteria. One for existing homes, which is less stringent. And the idea there was the board wanted to be accommodating to homeowners who had bought a property with something on it or had lived there and the shed had been there prior to annexation, something like that. So they set one criteria that was looser for existing sheds. And then they also set criteria for new sheds going forward. And really the only difference is that new sheds, according to the ordinance, should be placed in the buildable area. And that's the crux of the discussion tonight, whether or not that's something that should be changed. So that's the ordinance the board passed, and that ordinance applies to everyone throughout the village. Everyone throughout the village, if they want a shed new or if they want to get approval for an existing one, would have to come before the commission, like you did, and the other homeowners.
We had a petition made up of our 35 homes. Everybody signed it for sheds and fences, that we all were happy. She was one of the signatures, and everybody in Bartlett. We all wanted a shed. Some had, some didn't. There's still 6 or 7 people over there that don't have sheds, but they're old and don't want them, But other than that, all right. But, okay, now I kind of got it a little bit. I still.
Any other public comments? Yeah. Okay. You state your name, please?
Good evening. Jason Swiderski, 6500 Howard Avenue. It's great to see everybody, and I literally mean that. One of the unique situations with my neighbor cats and our house is that I believe we were both built in '02 when the rest of our neighborhood was built in the '70s. We were the very last 2 houses to go in there, from my understanding, and there's a good chance, I don't know when that ordinance was created, but I'm sure that it was before our house was built, so we never even had a chance to put, or whoever lived before us had a chance to put the shed in that particular area where they wanted it. I kind of like what Kat brought up too, I think. I don't understand the reason for buildable property. I think, I understand that the reason was to have Indian Head Park continue to have an open park-like atmosphere. When you looked at that description of our land, it's 75 by 290, I think it is. I don't see an issue where if it's next to our house or all the way at the end of our property, we're still getting that full park-like atmosphere feel for it. And I'm sure Kat could attest to this as well as me. We probably have more foot traffic that goes through our area with the park being right there than anybody else in our neighborhood. And we pride ourselves, I know I can speak on behalf of Gary, her husband, that we take pride in our, upholding to that park-like atmosphere and doing the best we can to make sure that that our property looks as good as it can be. So those are just my 2 comments I'd like to make. I appreciate you guys changing everything up because Kat does an excellent presentation, very thorough. And yeah, like was mentioned too, we kind of support it. We're in the same boat, and if the neighbors agree to it, and you don't see any problems with the hardship that we face going in front of windows with such minimal buildable property on our location, then we really ask for this variance. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I would agree. I think our job is to keep the village with a park-like atmosphere, and it doesn't make any sense to insist on in a buildable area when that doesn't serve our goal, doesn't even serve our purpose.
I mean, I think it's also it's important to consider the fact that we live here. We want to have that. We want to maintain that spirit, and anything that we put in is, I mean, we're trying to make sure that happens, and we're following we want to follow the parameters of making sure that it looks as nice as as it could possibly be. I mean, we're all working together. And I mean, I feel like having it's a hardship to have it, no matter what you think, it's a hardship to have it placed right up within that space. And the fact is that most of the sheds that are coming up in front of this council are outside of that area. And I think that, the ordinance, for as much work as you've put into it, I agree. I think that when you actually put that into practice, it's not working. So something needs to be fixed in order to make that happen.
Okay. All right. So I guess our motion would be to recommend to the board that we approve this special use and that the board take whatever actions necessary to approve the location outside the buildable area. Is that reasonable, Andy? That's a motion. You don't have to agree with it.
Yeah, I think that the best way to word that would be to recommend approval of the shed. Recommend granting a special use for the shed, and recommending in the same motion that the board modify the criteria for sheds so that.
Why would you say modify rather than just issue a variance? What's the difference?
Because again, my thinking is and again, I'm just saying based off staff's point of view, we make our recommendations based on, one, the direction of the board, and two, kind of the same thing, the way that the code is written. And, when I look at the code and one of the criteria for a variance is a unique hardship, I don't think it's a unique hardship. I think it's a hardship. I don't think it's a unique one. But it's not my call. So you can make the recommendation on a special use and a variance. You could do it that way. Or you could recommend a special use and recommend they modify the code. It's really up to you guys.
Andy, can I ask a quick question here? So
Yeah.
if staff disagrees that they disagree about the level of hardship, we're just a recommending board at this point, right? This still has to go before the trustees to decide whether or not they agree with that we should offer a variance. And if they say this isn't something that's worthy of a variance, we need to talk about changing the code, or they send it back down, that's their prerogative, right? We're in the very
Exactly.
early phases of making this decision. I guess my concern is that from a timing perspective, we're getting into time of year where the weather's getting warmer. I don't know how long the process is to rewrite the local ordinances or codes. This is a collaborative process that takes a year. Does it take 6 months? And I just worry that
I
we
know
may
that-
be dragging something out a little longer than it should, when in fact our primary role as a committee is just to say whether or not we think a variance is the right thing.
No,
And
it's
there's somebody
yeah.
there's somebody above that kind of checks whether or not we're making an informed opinion. That's all.
I think that's a really good point. And they've waited a long time already. So
That's why my suggestion
I would say if you want to approve the shed outside the buildable area, recommend the special use, recommend the variance, and recommend that the board reevaluate the code itself. Make all three if you want to approve it.
Do we have to have an application for variance?
Yeah. So I guess that would be my question in this instance, like.
It can be included. It can be included at this hearing. This is a public hearing for the special use, but it can also be a public
Maybe I'm
hearing
wrong,
for
but didn't we
anything.
last month say we recommended that they submit a application for a variance as well?
I believe we did.
I think the
Or at least
recommendation.
inform the
Yeah, it was to
petitioners?
follow up.
Did they have to do that?
Yeah, and pretty much. So I don't think we need to reschedule a hearing based on one word or the other. I think you could recommend. It doesn't have to be scheduled for you to make a recommendation. You can make a recommendation based off of the evaluation of the facts.
Do you have a copy of the findings of fact for the for variances?
So I have, like, the criteria, I mean? Yes. Let me,
And just a question, Andy, does this have to be a variance and a special use, or could it just be submitted as a variance?
Well, it has to be special use.
I would say is both. Yeah, I would say is both because the special use is
Allows the shed in the first place.
allows the shed. The variance allows it to be placed outside of the buildable area.
Because they don't even get a shed unless we approve a special
Yeah,
use. I mean,
so-
everything comes in front of this board, no matter
So
what.
the wording exactly in the code, there are 3 primary standards for a variance. One is related to commercial properties, which is not relevant here. The other 2 are the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances. And then the third one is the variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality.
What chapter is that? Can you read it out of?
This is chapter,
Sorry.
section 42107 in the village code.
Yeah, it's kind of not applicable because most houses aren't set up to have a perfect place to build a shed on the buildable area that is aesthetically reasonable.
Yeah, I mean,
So it is kind of an odd duck.
the intention was to kind of ensure the open space.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's my personal opinion. It's not the opinion of staff. It's by no means you have to go by it. But I think about the open space, and again, we allow trampolines and we allow playhouses to go anywhere, no matter what. Don't have to get any special permission. But a shed, I know a shed's probably a little bit different. Shed's a little more permanent, but I think as far as the park-like atmosphere goes, a screen shed, I think,
And we
is
get
going
to
to look a little
approve it.
better.
We get to approve it if it's there and it's not obstructing a view, and we get to approve the placement of that. And of course, we got the screening requirement. So the motion will be, we move to recommend to the board that the shed be approved in the chosen location of the petitioner, subject to variance or ordinance modification. Is that
Or
what we want
variance
to say?
approval and
And
possible
or whatever,
ordinance. Yeah.
whatever, we'll let the board decide which is the more appropriate way to do this.
Yeah, I think that's a fine, that there's no problems with that recommendation.
So is the motion 1, we approve the special use, and 2, we approve a variance? Is that
No,
really what the
Yeah,
motion?
we're recommending that the board do whichever of those procedures it needs to do to approve the special use and in that location. So, does somebody want to make a motion?
I would suggest if we separate out any recommendation of the board to go back and revisit the code from an action that we're taking related to an individual property, because those are 2 different things, right?
Yeah, so you can make one motion recommending a special use and variance, and then you can make a separate motion recommending reevaluation of the criteria.
Well, here's the thing. If the issue is, do we recommend the special use, some of us would say, no, we don't recommend a special, to build it where it's, the buildable area. So they're kind of hinge on each other.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
If some of us might feel like we'd approve the shed, but we do not approve the shed in the buildable area because it's an awful place to
Yeah, I
put
mean,
it.
yeah, that's true. So you could, if you want, you could break it down even more. You can have one motion just for the shed,
Yeah, but then.
have
but-
another motion just for the variance, and then
But-
another.
But you can't have a motion just for the shed, because it's yes or no depending on where.
You could have a one motion for the shed. Yeah, you're right. You're gonna have to combine the 2, I think, is the best route. And then
Yeah,
if somebody wants to make an alternative motion, they're free to do that too.
yeah.
So if somebody disagrees with it being placed outside the buildable area, they can make their own motion to recommend, but it has to be in the buildable area.
Okay.
So it really,
So I'll leave it up to commissioners. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the shed, approve the special use And does somebody, yes or no, and/or does somebody want to make a motion to approve the special use and whatever action the board requires to make it acceptable to build it in the preferred area, petitioner's preferred area?
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit lost here.
Okay.
Like, I guess my question is, I thought we were going back to whether or not we needed to have a long conversation about changing the code versus just issuing a variance in this
No, we
circumstance.
passed that a long time ago.
No, my recommendation would be combine, so you would say, I motion to recommend granting a special use for the shed and a variance for it to be placed outside the buildable area. That's one motion. And then have a second motion. We recommend that the village board reconsider or reevaluate the criteria for granting a special use. I think those are your two motions. Possible third motion is if you don't want it outside the buildable area, we recommend granting the special use if it's in the buildable area.
Okay.
I think those are your three potential motions that you got to choose between.
Okay, so what
Agree.
if this goes to the board and the board says, yes, we want to revisit modifications of the ordinance, which would then invalidate the decision we make on whether or not we approve the shed in the buildable
Our,
area?
they'd
our
approve
decision
both.
doesn't mean anything.
Right.
We're just making a recommendation to the board. Our decision means
They
nothing.
could approve the one motion and then
They can
deny
say-
the other, or approve them both.
Yeah, they can do
Or
whatever
one or
they
the
want.
other.
They just want our
So it
opinion.
doesn't matter how I vote on this one?
Well, well,
just-
they want our opinion, so
Yeah.
we want to vote our hearts here and tell them how we feel. And then it's up to them to make decisions.
Oh, Charlie,
one
I'm
more
sorry,
time
you got
to-
to take this back to the board.
One more time, though, Diane had brought up the point of like kind of like decoupling this conversation about whether we need to talk about the ordinance versus just the merits of Kat's
Yeah, I think.
idea.
I think we,
And I want to make sure that these are standalone things.
Yeah.
So
we're-
however that's structured.
We're making a recommendation based on this particular situation to go then back and sort of tell the board, we want to kind of start over and revisit this whole thing that
the
we
second
spent
one.
a couple years talking about. That's a whole nother thing, I think, that we would only do with maybe a little more consideration of whether that's really what
And could we
the road
make
we
it,
need to go down to solve these issues.
could we make it for 6500 and 6508 and have both of these done? Because it's the same situation for both.
It would be nice to make it quick, but unfortunately, technically, we have to hold two different hearings.
Okay.
I like the idea, though.
We could maybe turn it around quickly, the second one.
The second one should go a little bit,
So does
Better.
somebody want to make a motion, whatever that motion might be?
So the first motion would be to approve the special use and recommend a variance for 6506 Howard.
Okay, you make that motion?
And make that motion.
Does anybody want a second? Dan seconds. Let's do a roll call.
All right, Chair Costello.
Yes.
Let me mark this down really quick. Sorry.
It's the board's final decision.
I'm sorry, I'm writing this down really quick.
Yeah, so the motion was to recommend of approval of the special use and a
Variance.
variance.
Okay, Chair Costello is aye. Commissioner Bruno, yes.
Yay.
Commissioner Holm.
yes.
Commissioner Svestka.
No.
Commissioner Barnes.
No.
All right, the motion passes.
Does anybody want to make an alternate motion?
Do we want to go on record with votes for both of the options? Is that useful to the board? I could,
Well, if you want to make a motion that we approve the special use in the buildable area, that would be
I
a
would make a
motion.
motion that we would approve this shed if it is placed in the buildable area as was indicated on the site plan.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay, let's do a roll call on that one.
Just real clear, before we vote, are we contradicting what we just did by this, or was this just a
It's an
policy
alternate.
conversation?
It's an
about-
alternate.
It's an alternative recommendation. Chair Costello,
No.
Commissioner Holm,
No.
Commissioner Bruno,
No.
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Svestka.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Motion does not pass.
That kind of clarifies our opinion to the board. So
Yeah.
that's,
So that one's done. The next board meeting will be, is it next Thursday, right? Next Thursday, the board will evaluate it again. I would recommend, usually you don't have to be there, but since this one's kind of a unique one, I'd recommend coming, so. Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. All right, let me just tally this down, and then we can get going. Actually, why don't we, would you make a motion someone make a motion to start the next public hearing
Yeah, let's do it.
for 6500 Howard?
somebody like to make that motion?
I move that we do.
Second it.
Okay, motion carries to move on to our second hearing of the evening. And this is for 6500 Howard Avenue, a special use hearing. And petitioner, would you like to state your name and give us a few thoughts?
My name is Jason Swiderski, 6500 Howard Avenue. Kat did, like I said, most of the heavy speaking for me, but I'm in the same situation she is, where if I put a shed in my buildable area, it's blocking both my kitchen window as well as my sink window. I sent in 2 photos earlier this morning that show me my kitchen window looking due west and another window looking northwest towards the park. The survey that was showed last month by Andy, I outlined the buildable area, and the only buildable area is right there. So I know, like, you guys went thoroughly through the last motion. If there's any questions you have in my particular case, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, so this is a petition for special use for a shed, does not currently exist. Mr. Swiderski has completed all the required materials, gathered signatures, provided a plat of survey, and his garage is 20 by 22. Yeah, so let's see. And is this your survey?
I believe so, yes. And my proposal was to be in the far northwest corner of my property, again, to keep that open concept of the park-like atmosphere. Instead of being right next to my house, I'd like to keep it on the other side of the property so you can still see the luscious green of the backyard.
Hey, David, could you, oh, thank you, David, thank you. So this one is his property. His buildable area that is left is right here, which is directly outside the window pictures that you have, and he would like to put it somewhere back here.
If you can
Did I get that right?
That is correct, yeah. On the southwest side of my backyard, there's my kids' playground is back there.
Is there, do you have to tear down trees to put up a shed there, or you got a spot?
I do have a spot. There is brush back there, like Kat pointed out, that protects it and gives good shelter, especially during the summer when the leaves are full, to protect it from the west, from the tennis courts. The south is Kat's house, and the north is the park.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to clarify, Andy, on the diagram that you provided,
Yes.
I think where you delineated what the buildable area is.
Sorry, that's yours.
One of the things that's unique about this lot is that technically your lot actually encompasses what most people would probably think is the end of the road, right? That your lot actually extends further east
Correct.
Yeah.
than the lot we
is
were
a
just
unique one.
considering. And so if you calculate where the buildable area ends there, it's sort of to his disadvantage because
Yeah.
you take a percentage of the total lot depth. So he's kind of almost, the way this is depicted, sort of paying the price for the fact that so much of his lot is actually in front of his house.
Yeah, you're exactly. So
Right?
for some clarification, Commissioner Barnes, so his property technically extends, I think, to somewhere around here, right?
Correct.
Right, Jason? So this right here is technically his driveway, even though
Yeah.
the street turns into his driveway. So because his home, because most people, like take Kat's house right here, her property line is right here, whereas his is up here. His house is a lot further back into the buildable area than most homes.
So this is a situation where I would think we could look at the way the lot's laid out and consider making a slight exception to how we're interpreting what the buildable area is in a case like that. Like you can see on this is a much better aerial than what I can bring up on my phone for some reason.
Yeah, this would be a case where I think you could argue it would merit a variance.
That the buildable area should be interpreted as going back at least as far back from the house as it does for the immediate neighbor. Because the way it's drawn
exactly.
here, it's very tight to the back of the house, and that's only because the front yard is larger.
So are you suggesting that the shed could be built somewhere like in the middle of the yard? Instead of the back of the yard?
I think she's saying this would grant more of a unique circumstance. Kind of
Yeah,
deal
I mean, I
because the
think
buildable
a
area-
diagram at this house would look similar to the one that was provided for your house, which is that the buildable area would actually be more in line with, the back of the paver patio that's shown in the neighbor's yard here. Whereas the way you've got it drawn, it almost looks like it doesn't even extend out as far as the patio.
Yeah, and I mean, that technically is
Very,
the
very
buildable
tight.
area, but yeah, if it were a more normal property, then yeah, the buildable area would go back more.
There would be more of it behind the
Yeah.
house than there is if you calculate it.
So are you suggesting that we
Technical way.
consider a variance just to move the buildable area back in light of those circumstances? Or just the fact that because it's got unusual buildable area, we would, a variance anywhere is okay?
I would just say in a case like this, if it were to happen somewhere else in the village as well, to be sort of lenient in the definition of what would be considered the buildable area. If it's a
So
unique situation like this where if you take the percentage of the total depth, you end up, with just a little sliver behind the house. It's kind of similar to the one we looked at last
Same idea, yeah.
last month, where the house was sort of at an angle on the lot, and then you just ended up with this little sliver of area that was the buildable area, and even the house was outside of it, much less anything else. So it was a situation where you kind of had to look at the layout of the lot and think about,
So would we be recommending like
It's really buildable.
just extending the buildable area and saying like, oh, we don't like where this is at now, your proposed shed, maybe move it, the line back a little further and they'd move it up? Is that what we're kind of suggesting? Or-
I would interpret the buildable area for this house to be the same distance from the back lot line as it is for the neighbor. I mean, I think that would be a reasonable thing to do in
You're
this
asking
case.
us to consider moving the shed to the buildable area, but extending the buildable area. Yes.
Right. I think if could be consideration of the shed being in the buildable area, I think the buildable area is a larger area than is shown.
Well,
in
that
blue.
technically is it, but yeah, if it were a normal property, for lack of a better word, then yeah, the buildable area would be a bit more.
I think she's.
Yeah, I mean, if this was not part of his property over here, then his buildable area would be roughly in line with this tree, let's say, around there.
This is the first time I've seen a situation like this, but I suspect there are lots like that in the village where just the way the house is placed.
Yeah,
and the shape
I
of the
believe in
lot.
Hiawatha and Sequoia, there might be one or two that when the street turns into the driveway.
Yeah.
So,
Sort of if you
Yeah,
if you
it is.
calculate it the way the code tells you to calculate it, you end up with a pretty wacky, limitation.
yeah. No, that's a very good point, yeah.
Any discussion, commissioners? Any questions for?
So this does or does not
Petitioner?
require a variance?
Yeah, it would, well, it depends. If we're going to say it has to be on the buildable area as strictly the buildable area, no variance. If we're going to say that we'll take into consideration the odd nature of the lot, and so we'll allow the buildable area to go a little further, it would require a variance. Or if we're saying, no, we kind of like the corner that's, that the petitioner likes, then it would require variance as well. So it would not require variance if we're talking about staying strictly on the buildable area.
Which our petitioner doesn't want that, right?
Yeah,
You want
he's same
in the
exact
back.
situation as
Right.
last.
Yeah.
It's a window, it blocks the window.
And we've kind of exhausted a lot of the same principles here, so maybe we should jump to a motion?
Yep.
See where we go?
Yeah,
Unless
I
you have
think
anything to add.
generally the motion would be something like the last one. Special use and variance. If you wanted to make an alternative motion, that'd be just like the last one, just special use for the buildable area. Pretty much the same as the last one.
Yeah, or we can say a motion to approve in the buildable area, but with modifications to the buildable area based on,
Well,
yes.
If I would voice my opinion, if you modify and move that buildable area back, you're moving that shed into the middle of my
middle.
yard, and then you're defeating the purpose of an open landscape and a park-like atmosphere that you guys are trying to obtain. So that would be my,
I would agree with that too, but yeah,
It makes sense to me too. I mean,
yeah. Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
Motion to pass special use and variance for 6500 Howard,
And location of the shed where petitioner requests?
where the petitioner is requesting.
I'll second.
Okay.
one moment, I'll do a roll call. All right, Commissioner Barnes,
No.
Chair Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Bruno,
Yes.
Commissioner Holm. Yes. Commissioner Svestka.
No.
Okay. Motion passes.
Do we want an alternative motion?
We could do that if Andy recommends it. Is it helpful to do that, just to record the
Yeah, why not? I mean, might as well put your
upshot of the
opinion
discussion?
out there and let them know, so.
I would move that we approve the placement of the shed in the buildable area with the more generous definition of the buildable area that we would be willing to consider.
Second.
Now, just to clarify, if this motion passes, it will assume preeminence over the last motion, just so everyone knows. Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Chair Costello,
No.
Commissioner Bruno,
No.
Commissioner Holm,
Nope.
Commissioner Svestka.
Yes.
All right, the motion does not pass.
Thank you. Good luck. Okay, our next petition is for a shed and fence at 1734 65th Place. Mr. Ron Walters, Mrs. Michelle Walters, if you're here. They're applying for a special use permit for a shed and a special use permit for a fence. They're currently existing and have existed for over 30 years, and they were on the property when the Walters purchased it. The petitioners have gathered signatures. They've provided a plat of survey. The shed is not in a buildable area. Okay, and they, I think I forgot to put in the motions that the bulk mailing fee be paid in the screening.
It says, call it a Scribner's error.
Okay,
so,
yeah. So for all those, it's
Yeah.
conditioned on the petitioners paying the bulk fee and proper screening and inspection of the screening. Okay, so Mrs. Walters, would you like to say a few words?
Hi, good evening. Some of the things I had written down here you've already addressed, but I'll just go over it again. I just wanted to start with a quick background of why we are requesting a variance for our shed and fence. Both already existed on the property and were included on the listing when we purchased the house back in 1988. And part of the appeal in deciding to buy the home was based on the fact that the shed provided extra storage space for lawn and garden equipment necessary to maintain a lot of this size. Because of our corner lot location, the fence provided privacy as well as safety. For the 34 years we've lived in our home, the issue of an ordinance was never raised by the village, not even when in 1990 a permit was approved by Indian Head Park based on an inspection for a room addition. And over the last 34 years, we have invested a substantial amount of time and expense to improve the landscaping, creating a natural screen with plant materials. The shed and fence are barely visible from street view or adjacent lots at least 3/4 of the year. Having to remove the shed and fence as well as trees and shrubs would result in losing the privacy we value so much, and also we feel reduce the property value. My husband and I are now both retired and on fixed incomes, and these proposed changes would cause an extreme financial and emotional hardship. So for these reasons, we respectfully request a variance on both the shed and the fence.
Can I say one thing really quick?
Yeah, please.
So you can see in your memos now, if the fence, like, take for example the fence, if it's not approved, the staff recommendation was to provide a timeline for the structures to be removed. That recommendation is based on previous direction from the board, from when the board wanted, about a year and a half ago, wanted and staff did send out letters to all properties in the village that had non-compliant structures saying they needed to be taken down. That was kind of the beginning of the entire reevaluation of our ordinances. So the recommendation there, because I mean, really, when you're dealing with a non-compliant structure, you either have to make it compliant or require its removal if you want to honor the code. There are, Commissioner Sveska mentioned this to me, and this has come up in discussions before. You don't need to recommend removal. You could one thing that has been done in the past on properties is granting a special use with the criteria that it needs to be removed prior to sale of the property or transfer of the property. So if you don't approve so it's really, you can approve the fence and put in that criteria that it has to be removed, or you can not approve the fence, but then you'll have to make a recommendation as to whether it should be removed. So, but anyways, I think the best way to handle these you're gonna need, there's technically two different items, the shed and the fence. As far as the shed is an existing shed, much like a lot of the other existing sheds. It appears to be mostly, if not totally screened, as is. We would do an inspection just to make sure, but it appears to be totally screened. So staff recommends approval of the shed based off of the criteria of the ordinance, and based because it meets the criteria. And as far as the fence, unfortunately, staff can't recommend approval because to have a fence, you have to meet specific criteria like backing up to a commercial property, child with special needs, stuff like that. So it doesn't meet the criteria for the fence, so we're not recommending approval based on the ordinance, but the commission is able to recommend what it sees as fit. Okay. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
So we would just need to approve a special use for the shed because of the way the ordinance is written, and we don't need to have a variance. Mm-hmm. Would we need to have a variance for the fence as well? So we would do a variance approval for the fence and special use for the fence?
I don't even think you... I don't think you need a variance for the fence. I think you could say special use with the criteria that it has to be removed prior to sale or transfer. So I think you really need to decide what do you recommend to the board as to how we deal with non-compliant structures? Do we require the removal, or do we allow them to stay until and be removed upon the sale of the property?
How
I
would
think those are the two options I can think of that would still honor the code.
So let's deal with the shed.
Okay.
Do we have any, we've done this so many times. Any questions, any further discussion on this? Any public comments, or can we?
Related to the shed?
Yeah. Would somebody like to make a motion that we recommend to the board to approve the special use of the shed and in its current place, and which would be a variance, I guess, and provided that it remains as screened as it is, and
We need to do the variance, though, for this, because it's an existing shed and it's already
It's
in
an
the code.
existing shed.
It would just be for
Just for
special
special
oh yeah,
use.
because that's in the,
Special use,
that's
yeah.
in the code. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
ocean.
that's true. Yeah. Okay. I think that's about everything.
Yeah, motion to approve special use for the shed.
And second. Anybody?
Second it.
Okay. Let's do roll call. Let's.
Yeah. Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Chair Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Bruno,
Yes.
Commissioner Halm, and Commissioner Svestka.
Yes.
All right, motion is approved for the shed.
Okay, the fence.
I have a couple of questions.
Me too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry. What is the material on the fence?
It's a chain link.
Chain link. Okay. And is it in a condition of disrepair, or is it in good, solid, functioning
It's in
condition?
pretty good condition. I mean, it's an old fence, but it's
Yeah,
in pretty
sure.
good condition.
Okay. And Andy, if we were to recommend removal of the structure prior to sale of the home, how is that enforced?
Yeah, it is a little tricky. I don't have experience with that myself. I know John, the village administrator, has dealt with those. I think really what we do is it's not hard. It's not we will catch them, for lack of a better word, most of the time, because whether they're coming in to get a new water account set up or something like that, we'll catch them. But to be honest with you, I don't know if somebody wanted to skirt around it, it is feasible they could do it.
Could we record something?
Yeah, I mean, since any approval of these is an ordinance, and it would be a violation of the ordinance, we can put a lien on the property to try to find them. We can try to get some remediation if a homeowner were to sell it and get out of there before us knowing. It wouldn't be easy. It may be difficult, but we do have options to try to, to try to deal with somebody who's trying to get out of it. So. But it wouldn't be easy.
When was the first notice sent to the petitioner about the fence? Was it in the recent year or two here that we started enforcing it, or is anything past throughout the years issued?
So to my knowledge, the homeowners, and you may remember this too, I think it was in July of 2020. July of 2020, the village board asked staff to send letters out to all homeowners that we knew had non-compliant structures and letting them know that they would need to take it down. As you know, eventually the board reevaluated the decision, and that's why we went through the modifications to the code and the passage of the new shed and fence ordinances in last summer. So I believe the first that they probably have heard about it was July of 2020, I'm guessing, to my knowledge.
So we went from 88, 92 different times with stuff issued, and nobody brought it up, and then 30 years later, where
I'll be honest with you. The village did not enforce its ordinances. It just didn't. It let things go by. The gentleman had to postpone his hearing tonight. He just had some surgery. But the property, where is it?
6546?
Yeah, for example, so one thing that the village used to require was sale inspections prior to sale to see if there's any code deficiencies. Well, these homes were sold, the inspections were done, and the staff at the time marked that there was no deficiencies, despite having a fence or a shed. The ordinances weren't enforced. And the board made the decision in 2020, hey, we have these ordinances, we need to enforce them or get rid of them. And they made a decision to enforce them. And so that's why, unfortunately, 30 years later, we're here today.
I can't remember. It was 10 years ago or 9 years ago we moved in, and I can't remember if any village inspectors came in.
It was a short period
It
of
was,
time.
I don't know the exact time
We don't have
frame
one
that they
now.
did this.
They don't have them now.
I believe they were gotten rid
You have
of.
the surveyor come out, right? And that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
you
we
know?
purchased our home on Hiawatha 9 years ago. And
It-
one of those inspections was done.
It was
Now,
done.
our house is probably the original house that was on Hiawatha. It dates from 1935. We
Yeah.
discovered multiple code violations, electrical and plumbing.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
None of those were found in the inspection.
Yeah, the
inspection was
inspections
they
were-
showed up, they took
Yeah.
the money, and they checked the box, and they walked
Yeah,
away.
that's why that's why the current administration got rid of them, because
Yeah.
it was
It
not.
wasn't
So do we
helpful.
currently have, like, we don't have that going on right now?
No.
For any sale, we don't have anyone from the village inspecting?
Correct.
So are we gonna hire someone to handle that role?
So
I know this is off
We don't
kilter,
have-
but it all kind of comes
We
back
don't
to
have a
this.
requirement for an inspection.
So-
if you were to recommend, so here's what, if you were to recommend that removal has to take place at the sale or transfer, then it would be pretty easy. I would just send our code enforcement officer out there to take a look. He's the same guy.
And then if we had something in place, when they, going forward, we would catch this to make sure that fence got taken down then before the transfer of ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, as the staff person that's in charge of enforcing, the code like this, if you can catch somebody, you can help them out. Like, and we had somebody who was looking to buy a home here in the Bartlett subdivision, and they called just because they wanted to know about like vehicle stickers, and we said, by the way, do you know the rules about sheds and fences? And they didn't know. So if we can catch them, we'll let them know. But sometimes you don't catch them, and so
it's on
and then
the
at that
owner,
point,
right.
and then at that point, our code enforcement and our public works, they keep an eye out when they go through town to see if there's anything of note. And if we do catch something, we'll send a letter out and let somebody know this is the code. So enforcement's always kind of a struggle, but that's code enforcement. It's not easy.
So do we make a motion now to approve the fence with a stipulation that it needs to be removed?
Well, maybe a
upon
little
sale?
discussion, because there's no criteria in the code that the petitioner qualifies for a fence. So I guess we can discuss, is there any other consideration I'd like to throw out there?
What is that noise?
I'm not sure what that staticky noise is. Are people watching virtually hearing that instead of us?
David, do you know what that is?
Like a windstorm.
Yeah, just started too.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
So,
Mike was loose.
Are there other properties or owners that have a similar circumstance to the Walters?
Yeah.
Yes, they're on the
I'm just saying,
agenda
like,
next.
how many people are we talking about? Like,
Yeah,
that are-
so in the Bartlett homes, the next 3 properties are very similar. And then on the other side of town, there's probably like 12 properties that are similar situations.
where they had
Where they have
where
a-
the fence has been up there for 30 years.
Yep.
Okay.
Do we have any coming in front of us that have recently put in fences that were
No.
not there when they bought the house? No? Okay.
Not to our knowledge, no.
I would hope at least they would get,
A building permit.
that the fence contractor would know they couldn't come to the village and get a permit to install a fence. That-
Yeah,
that at least that's not happening.
Yeah, I had a fence contractor actually call a couple weeks ago saying, we want to get, we're getting licensed for the summer for fencing jobs. And I said, this may not be the place to get licensed. So yeah, so that's, even the contractors, they don't always know either. So if we can catch it, we do, and we try to, what we can to work with the homeowner and whatnot. But
Did you have comments, Diane? I thought you were.
Well, I have two questions. One is actually for the homeowner, which is, I noticed the pictures of the mature landscaping that you have around the full perimeter of your lot. So would it be feasible to go in and remove that fence without doing a lot of damage to significant landscaping?
Lose quite a bit of landscaping.
That would
I
have
would
to
lose-
be,
Yeah, a lot of the trees have grown into the fence. I would have to remove
Oh,
quite
okay.
a few
Okay.
trees.
Yeah, it's pretty thick, just from looking at it.
And then I worry about, we already have a drainage issue in our yard because acacia sits up about 10 feet over our yard, and we get a lot of their water, and I'm afraid if we have to remove any of those trees in the back that we have, it may be a bigger issue with drainage.
and then the question I have I think for Andy is, behind that property, the survey shows there's a 10-foot utility easement. So there's your chain link fence, and then there's a 10-foot easement, which technically is your
It's my
property that you can't get to, but it's sort of that little strip there. And then is there I'm blanking on the name, the cowboy fence or something, the kind of wooden fence
Split
that
rail
is
fence?
part of, the split rail fence, yeah, that's part of acacia. It doesn't actually provide any sort of
No, it's decorative.
security or anything, it's really decorative, but that sits on the other side of that easement, so there are actually two fences there?
that fence, I believe, is technically Mr. Swiderski's. And the fence ordinance.
And then it stops at
Yeah,
the end of your property?
Yeah, and the fence ordinance essentially allowed cowboy fences.
Those that were existing were
those
allowed
yes,
to remain?
those that were existing, yes.
It was the chain link fences that were the issue, okay.
And I believe there's also some wooden fences or privacy fences on the other side of town too.
Okay. And then my other question is there a precedent within the village at all to say, if we were to make a motion that the fence needs to be removed, or that the fence needs to be removed with the exception of maybe, being careful about maybe leaving some pieces that might be, grown into a mature tree or something like that. Could we say that be done at the village's expense rather than the homeowner's expense?
You could. This in general is pretty unprecedented. The last time that this was seriously evaluated was 1984. You can make that recommendation too, that, you could say it's not conforming, it needs to go, but the village screwed up. We bear the cost, or you could go the route of it's non-conforming, but we understand it's been there a long time. The area was annexed, prior to or after a lot of these structures were built. The deal will be they have to come down on sale or transfer property. It's you can make either of those recommendations.
Because part of my concern is, the idea that, the prohibition of fences throughout the village, really the intent is, to some extent, it's to allow free movement of, wildlife. You don't want people being able to trespass. We had that issue with the homeowner who's, backs up to 65th Place last month, that there's a consideration for people cutting through the property because it's so open. But at the same time, like over on Hiawatha, we want the deer to be able to walk through, right, if they're trying to get from one place to another. But I do have a concern of it being a financial hardship to a homeowner who, because we suddenly decided to start enforcing our longstanding ordinances, and it is a
You're talking
cost.
probably about $1,000.
Right.
Yeah,
To
probably.
have somebody come out and do it. So I I'm with
And,
you.
and then the other issue of there not wanting to have there be the negative impact of some mature landscaping having to be removed just so that a section of chain link fence can be removed. That was something I hadn't really, I mean, there's some areas where it would be easy to do and others where it would be more challenging to do. So you'd want somebody out there doing it who, you know, had been given some pretty clear direction to be careful and selective and, you know, and so it couldn't be just anybody. Maybe it's better to, if we
Maybe like a
go this
landscape
route, to
person.
have the village offer to work with the homeowner to schedule it, but have someone who knows what they're doing and is going to be careful come out and do what needs to be done without the homeowner having to bear any cost for that work.
Go ahead.
Oh, pardon my ignorance. When did we annex the Bartlett area, Indian Head Park?
You know, I don't have the exact year. I believe it was 1972. It was early 1970s.
And we had the no fence.
Yeah,
In
you know,
place then, and we didn't-
the village, upon the annexation of the Bartlett subdivision, and also upon the annexation of Hiawatha and Sequoia, the village did not have any kind of agreement or set schedule for, you know, they just annexed them. They didn't, there was no agreement. These are grandfathered, these are okay, these have to come down in this many years. There was none of that. It was just annexed. It was really an oversight.
And that's kind of where I'm stuck with, like, if we are going to enforce something that we didn't enforce when we initially annexed it, when we've had multiple times to do it, and now we're going to come in and say it. I mean, I know we're allowing the special uses for the sheds, and the same thing for the fences, and I other parts of Indian Head Park, I totally am on board with no fences, and I don't like fences in our neighborhood. But in this situation, especially that area there, it's kind of, I'm stuck with like, oh, well, we've had multiple opportunities when we first annexed it, when we issued building permits, when we sold properties, and now we're going to come in and say, hey, you got to get them out. That's where I'm just trying to juggle that.
And you know, one of the criteria of the variance, of granting a variance in general, is will it change the nature of the locality, which is generally interpreted as the neighborhood, not necessarily, I mean, you could interpret it, you know, the entire village, but it's also the neighborhood.
Right.
Where, you know, on the west side, you could argue, yeah, it will change. It would change it. Bartlett Homes,
Right.
it's a fence is not going to change the nature of the neighborhood. Fences have been there for 50 years.
Well, yeah, but I mean, also like a 50-year-old fence, right, is going to need maintenance and repair at some point in time. So I think that's another thing to consider.
Yeah, and well, as far as the maintenance thing, that would most likely be covered under the building code, like deteriorating structures in general. We have the ability to say, you got to fix it up. You know, I don't have the specifics in front of me. Our code enforcement official is much more read up on this, knowledgeable about what the specifics are as to when you can require maintenance to be done. But as far as the concern of this is in bad condition, we have tools in our toolbox to deal with that issue kind of separately from this process is my thinking.
Andy, I had one question. How many parcels are there total in Indian Head Park?
I can't tell you parcels, but I can tell you that there's approximately 1,900 households. I cannot tell you exact amount.
Well, yeah, I guess that's. I mean, I might be using the wrong term, but I'm saying like, you know, homes or land, you know, areas that are,
Yeah.
you know, owned by homeowners. I guess is, you know, whatever terminology you want to use.
You know, and that
100, you said?
Yeah, that 1,900, that does include households and like condos and stuff.
Yeah,
So, you know, maybe subtract, I don't know, 500, 700, I don't know.
So like 12. I mean, let's just say for simplicity's sake, 1,000 to 1,200.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Freestanding homes that aren't condominiums,
Yeah.
single
That's
family.
probably roughly, yeah.
And how many of these, homes have these fences that we're going to be discussing.
So to our knowledge, there are probably about 20. My guess is there's probably a handful more of that we aren't aware of, but I think we are aware of the vast majority of them.
20 on the ceiling, maybe 30, or 20 as the floor, 30 as the ceiling.
Yeah,
Somewhere in there?
yeah.
Okay, 3%.
Thanks.
Can I just mention another concern that I have? With removal of the fence, I feel it would open up a pathway for acacia to be cutting through my yard and then to the street, which they commonly do all the time, even though there's a split rail fence there. I mean, these are some of the concerns that my neighbors to the east, I think, brought up in the last meeting. But I just feel that because the park is there, and we lived there long enough to know before those two houses were built how many people were coming through all of the time, which is now a little bit more difficult. So I would have some concern that if I didn't have my fence there butting up to the split rail fence, that would create, some trespassing issues.
Not to belittle that, I totally understand it, but that kind of was like where we were at last time. Was like, well, we understand that part of it, but I think what you should hang your head on is that this thing's been there. I don't think that we should even
Right.
interpret.
Right. I
like
just
the
wanted
trespass.
to
Yeah.
just add that to my concerns.
So we have a lot of choices here. To make a motion to recommend, to approve the special use, to make a motion to not recommend, or to make a motion to recommend with conditions. And it sounds like we've talked about the cost to the homeowner, the plantings, and perhaps the water issue being, and the fact that it's been there 30 years, is that right?
Probably
than 30
long before
years.
we even bought the house, I would assume. 34 of our years, anyway.
So that being a consideration rather than a condition. But what's everybody thinking?
I think the, special use with the condition that it's, removed or further examined at the time of sale based on, some of the points that Diane brought up about landscape and easement. I mean, there's a lot of other factors, but at minimum, I think that's where we should go with it, so that we're not putting the owner in any type of, financial hardship at this point in time. Let them enjoy their home.
Yeah.
I will say really quick, while the idea puts a little more burden on the village, that I think you are much more likely to ensure compliance if it's on the village's dime. Whereas I'm not saying you would or anything, but I'm saying theoretically, if the home, you grant it to the homeowner, you can keep it, but it has to go on the sale of the property. I think most likely they would comply, but there is the chance they try to get out of there without doing it. Whereas if you say it has to be removed upon the sale and the village will take it down for you, I think they're much more likely to give us a call before they sell.
Well, either way, in that situation, we'd be forking it over, right? So.
Yeah.
What if we say if the village will pay for it if you do it in 6 months?
Yeah, I think you got a couple options.
After that, it's on your own and it has to be removed before
Yeah.
you sell.
That's a good idea too. I like that too.
But it's already built into the structure of the village code that it has to be maintained. So it's not that a homeowner can just let it fall over and leave it there. I mean, they would then be faced with the choice of, I either pay someone to come and fix it so that I don't get a, blight ordinance citation or whatever.
Exactly.
Or I call them and say, you know what, guys, I'm ready for you guys to come and take it out of here. Just let me know what day you're coming. And the village would send someone to remove the non-compliant fence at the village's expense.
And I mean, this is something that could come up during, closing when you're selling your home. I mean, if it's part of, the property, I mean, you might end up having a conversation with the incoming buyer where it's like, well,
The
this
real estate
fence,
agent should.
this fence has to be removed and who's on the hook for it. And, depending on the nature of the inspection list, I mean, the fence may be the furthest thing from their mind. There could be other issues related to the home that they'd be more concerned about. in terms of having them addressed. So at that point, it really becomes a conversation between the parties as to, how they want to resolve it and how they want to negotiate it. So I think that although you'd be there to enforce it, you would hope that it would be part of their conversation to deal with it between parties. And if that didn't work, obviously you have the ability to enforce it as you see fit.
Yeah,
So how many motions are we going to do here?
Well-
I only got one written down.
You can make your motion, and then we can discuss modifying it. Why don't you make a motion?
Motion to approve existing fence with the condition of removal upon transfer or sale of property.
Would somebody like to
second.
modify? Oh, okay. And any further discussion on this, or do we like to modify that motion?
We could add a second if we wanted to, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we can
Yeah,
discuss now.
I think based on the feedback from Andy, I would like to modify it to include that it's removed by the village at the village's expense.
So it's
Time of
really,
sale,
the timing of that is kind of up to the current homeowner. It needs to be done before the home is sold. It could be done next week, it could be done in 2 years, it could be done when they choose to sell.
And on the villages.
Yeah.
Okay.
That motion needs to be seconded.
Sorry.
Second.
No, you're good. Yeah. All right. There you go. So now you have before you the motion to grant the special use and variance for the fence with the criteria that it has to be removed prior to the sale or transfer of the property
And,
at the village's expense.
okay.
That is the motion before you. Are we ready for a vote?
Yeah, did that
Roll
get
call?
seconded? Yeah.
Yeah. it's seconded.
Yes, let's do a roll call vote on that.
All right. Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner or Chair Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Bruno,
Yes.
Commissioner Holm, and Commissioner Svestka.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Motion carries. Okay, congratulations.
You
All
appreciate
right.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we can start the next one. I'm just going to write down this motion
Okay.
while we're starting.
Our next hearing is for 6547 Howard. Hello, and this is our petitioner, Ms. Sarah Rayla, I take it. And this is for a shed, special use, permit, and a fence. Signatures have been gathered, plat of survey has been provided. Yeah, okay. Would you like to say a few words and let us know your situation?
Yes, so we have been living here about 5 years. Prior to buying our home, some of the concerns that we had about moving in, where we have an easement in between us and the north house. So there's tons of water that goes through there. It's always like a river. And knowing we wanted kids at the time, and now we have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So that was always a thing before moving in or buying the home, safety of our children that we want to have, falling in this ditch, drowning, whatever. In addition to that, in the front yard, we have those open sewers. Again, just kids crawling inside. There's no coverings on them, nothing. They can go inside. Again, the ditches drown everything. So that was one thing, and the house had the fence and the shed when we bought the house, so we never had any awareness that this was against code or wasn't allowed to be there. So never crossed our mind that we'd ever be having this issue now. So we are hoping that you guys let us keep our shed and our fence. Of course, we will upkeep it. And also, we have a really big, long ranch. So I don't know that you can see the fence at all or our shed from the street. And our neighbors, one side is completely covered by trees, but they are all okay with it. So it's been there as long as we know. We've been told it was grandfathered in. I don't even know what that means anymore. But those were deciding factors on us buying our house. So
When did you move in?
we moved in 2016. 15 December.
Okay.
So, I mean, we like living here, and we just want to be able to keep what we bought.
Our neighbors say it's been there 30-plus years, too.
Yeah. Do we have some questions for our petitioners?
Just to clarify, Andy, the village did go through the process of searching back in the archives and identifying the homes where some property owners had come to the village and actually gotten a variance back in the day, right?
Yeah, so a lot of, it was 1984 was the year. I don't know exactly how it went down, but at that time, I think the board and they reevaluated the ordinance, changed the ordinance a little bit, and went through this process of having people come for special uses. So yeah, there are a number of homes in the Bartlett homes that, especially that have special uses from 1984.
Okay, so I mean, we're only talking with homeowners for which you couldn't find any record of that having been done.
For whatever reason, they never
Real estate
came.
agents have been telling people, oh, don't worry about it, it's grandfathered in, where in some cases it is.
Right.
And in other, probably more numerous cases, it actually isn't. Okay.
And then since that time, we've had this ongoing issue where, for a wide range of reasons, the village just chose not to enforce it. And now it's kind of was the case up until 2020, when the board decided, okay, we're going to start taking a more critical look at that. So in other words, about 36 years had passed between the
84.
Yeah, and I believe
My math is
like
right.
the current administration, because I've asked, like, how did this come about? From my understanding is when the new administration came in, they started enforcing it, but over time they realized, oh my God, we got a lot of them that are non-compliant, that weren't grandfathered and weren't given special uses. And then, they're faced with the tough decision, do we enforce the ordinance or not? And being the village government, they're obligated to enforce their ordinances.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
One more time from my earlier question about 1,000 to 1,200 single-family homes in the area, and we're talking between 20 and 30, right?
yeah, and I would say
How many of those?
some of those homes of that 1,200 also would be townhomes, like Ashbrook or Acacia, and they have their own
Yeah.
HOA restrictions that are even more restrictive than our restrictions. So I don't even know, but as far
600,
as
right?
yeah, it's a small number, but it's but yeah.
Okay.
In all likelihood, some of those fences might have been approved because of like a swimming pool or like some other item like ADA or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's,
Oh, that's fun.
It needed grass.
well, let's do the easy part. Would somebody like to make a motion that we approve the special use for the shed, provided that the petitioner's share of the bulk mailing fee be paid and that the shed be properly screened? We need some screening on this.
Okay.
Some plantings and things to cover that.
Sure.
And it has to be high. Oh, yeah.
it
Lot
look-
higher.
Yeah.
Pretty far from our lot. Like, if you stand in the street or even in our driveway, I mean, our yard is so far back that you can't see either, but
It
sure,
look
I would
yeah.
definitely put
Long-term.
trees.
Yeah, it looks mostly screened, but what we'll do, and we'll follow up with you on this, is so in July we're gonna have the first round of screening inspections, and and before that we'll have our code enforcement official just go out, take a look, make the determination. Does it need a little more screening here, or is it good? And
Right,
we'll let
that's a
you know.
Close up. If I took it
Yeah.
from like what people are actually seeing, we wasn't prepared with my PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely, we can definitely plant more stuff, and we continue to plan to do that.
Just that we follow the
Yes,
the rule that we've been going
Not
on
a
with
problem
everybody
at
here.
all.
Yeah, 'cause it looks like two sides is perfect. Very well screened. The petitioner provide bulk mailing fee and screening.
I will second that.
Well, I didn't make the
Oh,
motion.
sorry.
I'll make
thought
the
you just made the
motion,
motion.
and Danielle can second it.
Okay, there you
Okay.
go.
Diane makes the motion, Danielle seconds. And all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously for the shed. Fence. Okay, what are you thinking, commissioners?
It's also a chain link fence?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And how is the condition of the structure?
Seems pretty good. I mean, we've never had any issues with it. We really don't touch any of it. There's one little side that we can go in and out. One side doesn't even open. Like I said, it's really far back. We really, one, want it just for the fact of that easement waterway. And two, obviously, we don't want to pay for costs to remove it. Yeah, on the one side, there's trees in front of it, so in front of the easement. So lining the whole thing in the summer, you can't even see the fence whatsoever.
Looks like a lot of buckthorn on this picture, which you probably would want to take out eventually at some point anyway.
But we do plan, my husband's duty, I want trees all around our yard, so it's in the making. It'll hide it even more.
And
We need more trees.
the fences surround your entire lot?
Just the backyard, so it's like halfway in the middle of our house and back, so like probably right there, yeah. So that's what I'm saying, we have so much house in front that you can't even see that we have a fence in the back. So from any street or side view, you can't see it. The only ones that would see it would be our neighbors in the winter.
Again, I come back to this as being the Bartlett area that we, that's just my feeling that when we annexed this, we should have done all our diligence and done that. And so at this juncture, we should continue like we just did. And that's just my opinion. So I don't know how everyone else feels, but,
So,
and it's exclusive to this area. I'm not trying to set precedents of other parts of the village. I only feel that way here, so.
so for consistency, we would approve a special use for the fence with the same condition, which would be that upon sale of the property, it would be removed prior to the sale, and and in coordination with the village, that the cost of removing that fence would be borne by the village rather than the homeowner.
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
I
And
think
in the
it's
meantime,
probably
it just has to be
same.
maintained.
And my
Yeah.
thing on that part is, I think, and we could see, I'm just saying, like, we think we did that before because she was on fixed income, right? That was kind of our thought process. Where if it's, I don't know if we should always go and pay for removal of a fence.
Yeah, I think not always, but I
the
think
village kind
in
of-
the Bartlett homes,
Okay,
the village screwed up. I think it's fair.
okay.
That's my thought.
Put that in the minutes, that it's because we were a
In the
little bit
minutes,
negligent.
the village screwed up.
It's a problem of your own making, and you'll pay to fix it, right?
Yeah, I know, and the board has to approve this. We're just making a recommendation.
Well, I appreciate
But,
it.
yeah, we want that in the minutes, that we're not going to just pay to correct everything that's out of compliance.
Right.
But the goal is achieved over time, which is over time, we become more consistently compliant with the codes.
Yeah,
Without
exactly.
burdening the homeowners that were put into this situation
Yeah.
by the
So you have a
actions of
duty to
others.
maintain it, that's it looks like the motion might be that we'll approve it, but it has to be taken out when you move.
Prior to sale.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So does somebody want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, to approve the special use of the
Oh, yeah.
fence on the condition that it be removed prior to sale at the village's expense because it's in the Bartlett subdivision.
Second
And-
that.
Okay, Justin seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
We are going to
congratulations.
sneak out. We have a babysitter.
Thanks.
Should have done you first.
Fun date night.
And now I'd like somebody to make a motion that we continue the hearing for 6546 Howard Avenue because the petitioner was unable to be heard tonight.
Motion to continue?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries to continue the hearing for 6546 Howard Avenue. And now 6624 Howard Avenue, special use. And state your name and,
James Eckwall,
okay, catch.
6624 Howard.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what you're looking for, Mr. Eckwall.
Okay, well, we have a shed which has been there for a long time. It's an existing shed, and it's built, I use it for storing my lawnmowers and my garden equipment and that type of thing. It's needed for that. I have a big lot with a lot of landscaping, and so I don't have much room in my garage. When I built the garage 30-some years ago, I would have liked to have gotten a 2.5-car garage, but because I would have had to get a variance for that, so we made it just a 2-car garage with just barely enough to put the 2 cars in and then no storage. There's no way I could get a lawnmower in there or anything like that. So the shed is really needed for that. It's in, I don't know if it's in the buildable area or not, probably not, but it's got a lot of trees around it, and it's so it's well, what do you say with the land?
Screened?
Well, screened,
Yeah.
exactly.
So is that yours?
That's the shed, yes.
Are there 2 sheds or 1?
Well, there's another one next to it, which we're gonna, actually is gonna be taken down.
So how many sheds are on the property in total?
Well, there's the 2, and then there's a couple of Rubbermaid structures that really aren't permanent structures.
Oh.
Are they going to
how
be
many of
removed?
those?
2,
So there's 4 structures in total?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let me see. So are you planning to remove those Rubbermaid ones?
Well, we could.
Yeah.
The main one I'm concerned about is the one that you see in the picture, because that was custom made for to hold the riding mower and.
So it looks like there's structures on either side of this. Is that right?
Yeah, one of the Rubbermaid
Thanks,
ones is
Justin.
on the other side, and then there's a shed an older shed on the other side, which is going to be taken down.
Okay.
Have all these sheds been, are these all ones that you've purchased or put up since you've owned the property?
Yeah, I've been there for 42 years.
42 years, okay.
Been there for a long time.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Eckwall?
And
Any further questions?
this is just a request related to the shed, right? The fence that we see in the picture is the fence against the condo property that's
Yeah, that's not my
adjacent to you,
fence.
right?
That's owned by
Okay,
the apartments in back there. Right.
okay.
I believe, is that Briar Place?
Briar
Right, so
Place
that's-
No, it's a
is
little
to the,
further.
that's- That's next to, let's see, that's to the.
Those are the apartment buildings.
Yeah, those are the apartment, you're right,
yeah,
this is
that's the
Briar
apartment
Place,
building.
yeah,
Briar Place is further east.
yeah.
What is the round structure that kind of looks like a pool? What is that?
Pool with a fence around it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the pool with the duck around it.
Oh, that is a pool?
Yeah. Yeah, that's been there since 1984,
Oh.
and it was and it was approved by the village at the
Uh-huh.
time. And that's why it's sunk halfway in the ground,
Uh-huh.
because it was.
Oh, it's an in-ground one technically?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, at the time, and I understand that the rules changed after
Sure.
that, but I remember being, at the time it was Gordon Bigelow was the building inspector. I remember being many mornings at his desk, and he said that it has to be at least halfway. It's above ground pool, but it had to be at least halfway in the ground to qualify as a
Gotcha.
in-ground pool, and that was when it was, that was why it was made that way.
Understand, okay.
Lot going on.
Okay, so we're probably inclined to grant the variance for one shed.
Uh-huh.
Is everybody on the same page with that?
One shed, yes.
Yeah. And our conditions would be that it's that you provide screening on 3 sides for that. Well, actually 2, because the back is all, because the back
faces
is
up to the
fine.
Apartment buildings, and that's, and
Yeah.
there's screening in there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then should the approval be contingent on the other ones being removed too?
I would say, don't
I
you
would
think,
say
Andy?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that would be appropriate, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So would
can
somebody like to?
Could I ask a quick question?
Oh, yeah.
I just, why isn't there anything in the staff recommendations about the fact that there's 4 sheds on the property? I guess, like, how did that not become kind of a topic of conversation? I'm just curious as to, why we're looking at overhead and seeing 4 of them when we're having a conversation about 1. How did we arrive at the point where
We got
4 sheds end up, and I'm not accusing, I'm not saying the homeowner did anything wrong, I'm just trying to get my head around how we've arrived at a point where there's 4 sheds.
Well, there was never the problem with the sheds until, of course, they came and sent the letter they had to be taken down. So I'm only concerned about keeping the 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine, I just wanted to clarify, because accumulating 4 sheds over the period of time, I'm just trying to get my head around how we got to that point. It's not a criticism, I just, don't understand it, so.
You're asking like how it didn't get
It's
caught,
actually
or-
here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just says there appears
Okay.
to
All
be
right.
4, but the petition is for
All right.
only 1.
I understand, okay, I misread it, I'm sorry about that, Andy. I was just trying to, understand how,
Yeah. Yeah.
most of the places we've been considering have been just 1 shed, so I just kind of threw me for a loop, that's all.
Okay, so would somebody like to, any further discussion?
So this is a situation where the inspector who's going out to visit the other homeowners would visit and talk about what the requirements are going to be for landscaping.
Yeah.
And at that point, like, those sheds wouldn't need to be gone yet, but they will need to be gone by the time, the inspection in July, when the landscaping is supposed to
Yeah,
have been installed?
I think we'll set a July 1 date for removal. But, we are flexible as long as you're willing to work with us if you need,
I need a little more time than that.
it's fine as long as it happens. There's somebody who had a fence and they needed to. They knew they needed to take it down and they needed a little more time, and we give it to them. So, we'll work with you. Staff will work with you.
I think we could work out the
time.
deadline.
Yeah.
You guys
Yeah.
later, and we'll just discuss this ordinance or this recommendation.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion that we recommend to the board that we approve this petition for special use on the condition that the other structures be removed and that proper screening is provided and that the petitioner pays his share of the bulk mailing fee?
I'll move.
And second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
I had a question, with that last part, that the petitioner pays what now?
There is so whenever you have like a zoning hearing, we're legally required to send out a mailing to everyone within 250 feet, letting them know there's a zoning hearing on this date. We also are required to put it in the newspaper, and so part of the process was that the homeowners were going to pool together to pay their equal share of that mailing cost, which came out to be about $90 per homeowner.
Okay. I said, I didn't hear about that in any of the other hearings, so that's why.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
just for your information, usually the fee is a lot higher, but we're trying to do it all in kind of one time so that we can spread that cost out over a lot of people.
Okay.
So,
That's no problem. I didn't know what it was.
It's it's
Sure,
a minimal.
yeah. And so what will happen is, so this is a recommending body. It'll go to the Board of Trustees next Thursday. They have the final decision, and then they will pass an ordinance specific to your property saying you're granted the special use for the shed on the contingency that you pay the mailing fee and that you remove the other sheds in a timely manner. And then we will send you in the mail a copy of that ordinance for your record, and then also we'll send you the invoice for the mailing fee too. So we'll work with you. We'll work with you, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Any new business, old business? Discussion? Do you have anything else, Andy?
No, I don't think so.
I have a question for Andy. Did you have an update, or do we need to talk about an update on that Wolf Road fence?
Oh, so yeah, the Wolf Road fence is almost entirely removed. There is one portion of the fence left that is kind of acting as like a wall to his neighbor's like fire log storage. And so
Interesting.
it's a long story. It's already 9:30, but what I'll say is the homeowner had no problem taking down the fence. His neighbor was the one that was really upset.
This
that
is
it was
the one
gonna
where we approved that kitchen.
Yeah, kitchen and porch.
Right,
I think so, yeah.
Yep.
And so I said to the guy, I said, look, if you can take it all down, just leave that part up. You may have to take it down eventually, that one section. But for now, you can keep it, but we'll let you know as we move to the other side of town. So
Sorry.
all the rest of the fence. It's you probably won't even know. I mean, you may notice it.
Oh, no, you can tell.
That one slat.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. Well, how do we go about that then? Do we
No, I
send
mean
that
that was that that one thing. We can make him take it down. I told him he could keep it for now, but that when we send letters out to everyone on the west side, I do want to give you guys a little update about that too.
Yep.
But I told him, when we send letters out to everyone on the west side, depending on what everyone wants to do, you may be told at that time, yeah, you got to take down the rest of it. So, so as for the west side of town, Lisa and I were actually going over this just yesterday, looking at what's left for the Bartlett homes and then what's to go with the west side of town. For the Bartlett homes, after these 5 are resolved, we'll have 2 left. 2 left to come before the commission. And then there's a 3rd home that we found out has a 2nd shed. They were approved for 1 shed. So they will have to deal with that home on its own basis as well. If the homeowner wants, they could come before you. If not, I mean, what we'll do is we'll tell them it's non-compliant. You have to take it down. If you'd like, you can come to this, but they didn't get in on the mailing. So that's really it for the Bartlett homes. We have, after these 5, 2 more. And then on the west side of town, we need to go out and re-inspect to see if anything's changed since 1.5 years ago. But the number we had was 22 homes with, I believe 13 of them were fences, and the rest were sheds. And so the thought is we're going to have our code enforcement official go out this month to take extensive photos, because one other thing we realized is tricky about the west side is it is a lot more wooded than this side, so the aerial photos are not as useful. So we're going to have our code enforcement official go out and take extensive photos and notes, and we'll have a final list of how many non-compliant structures we have. And then at that time, we're going to figure out, well, after we get that information back, we're going to figure out, okay, what's the best way to group the mailings, all of that, and then we'll go through the process again. I think the upside is once the Bartlett homes are resolved, we'll know exactly what we want to do, I think, for the most part, with the homes on that side. So we got another 20 to go, I'd say.
That's great. Moving along.
All of 2022.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, any second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See you next month. Thank you.